Hello, Mr. Lakhani and fellow students. My name is Jasdeep Dinsa, and today I'll be presenting the data that I've collected and analyzed, as well as conclusions that I've reached for this assignment. So, the topic or thesis that I've assessed is what is the relationship between the amount of time spent studying and overall average of students. This topic instantly stood out to me at the time because I chose it in June near the end of the year when every student was stressing about their averages, and also I thought the data would help me figure out a new and improved study regime for post-secondary education. That being said, let's begin. So, some of the sub-questions that I wanted to answer going into this are: what is the correlation between the two variables x and y? X being the amount of time spent studying and y being the overall average achieved. What is the most efficient amount of studying time needed for a successful average? Of course, everyone's idea of success is different, so that answer varies, but hopefully you'll get some insight after this presentation. And finally, what are some study habits that one could adopt? My hypothesis before collecting the data was that there would be a strong positive correlation between the amount of time spent studying and the overall average. This idea didn't really have any factual support, it was just a hunch that I had because I know I personally achieve higher marks when I study more. The population of this data, or N, was 25 grade 12 students nearing the end of the year, so the averages collected are fairly consistent with the final averages of the students. The sampling method that I chose was a census. I chose this because it was fair and I believed it would get me the best data to analyze since it gave all the participants a fair chance to give their input. The census that I created involved filling out a survey with various questions on it. Here I have provided a survey of an anonymous student as an example. So the first question is, how many hours do you study weekly? This student answered 10. The second question is, what is your average? This student answered 83. Do you believe that the amount of time you spend studying plays a large role in your average? This student answered yes. Do you believe you could achieve a higher average if you studied more? Yes. How are your time management skills? This student answered okay. And finally, how many hours weekly do you believe it takes for studying to become ineffective? This student answered 20. Moving on, I've created a frequency table to show all the data. The intervals go by twos, and as you can see, the interval of 6 to 8 hours of studying per week has the highest frequency. Looking back, I didn't run into any problems with my data since it was fairly simple and it was all primary data collected by myself. Next, I determined the mean, median, and mode of the data. The median is 9, the mode is 8 and 10, and the mean is 241 divided by 25, which gives us 9.64. After that, I wanted to know the spread of the data, so I determined the standard deviation. To determine this, first you must find the variance. To find the standard deviation, you must take the square root of the variance. Therefore, the standard deviation is 4.786, meaning that the normal or standard amount of time spent studying in this set of data is 4.85 hours to 14.43 hours. After finding the standard deviation, I continue to calculate the spread of the data by determining the interquartile range. The first quartile is determined by finding the median of the data below the median, and the third quartile is determined by finding the median of the data above the median, which is 9. After finding Q1 and Q3, to find the interquartile range, you must find the difference between the two. Therefore, the interquartile range is 13 minus 6, which gives us 7. Next, I wanted to move on to the linear regression of the data, so I determined the correlation coefficient. I used this table to determine all the variables needed to calculate the correlation coefficient. Here are the calculations that I did to find the coefficient, which turned out to be 0.99, which is very strong and positive, almost perfect actually.
Created using Powtoon.